Hi guys. Okay, before you watch this video, I want to make darn sure that you understand a few things, because if not, you can really mess up your gun and you could potentially mess yourself up severely if you don't understand this. Okay, I am using black powder in this video. Okay, I am not using modern powders. I am not using a smokeless powder. Smokeless powder and modern powder has a much higher chamber pressure, so it takes fewer grains of modern powder to equal many more grains of black powder. Okay, so you have to understand that. Okay, for, let's say, for my 44 black powder. Okay, for me to propel a 230 grain bullet, give or take, with black powder, it will take me anywhere from 20, 25, perhaps 30 grains of black powder. With some of the more modern smokeless powders, it may only take 11 or 15. Okay? So when I'm talking about using 100 grains of powder, I'm talking about using 100 grains of black powder. Okay? Black powder does not have the chamber pressure of modern smokeless powders. Okay? So, make sure that you know that. This is why you cannot shoot modern or smokeless powders out of a black powder rifle. However, you can shoot black powder out of a modern firearm, because a modern firearm is designed to handle the increased pressures of modern powders. This is also why you have to be very careful when you're reloading with modern powders. Okay, I'm using black powder in these, so now that you know that, I feel safe to let you know and let you continue watching the rest of this video. Oh, by the way, loadout for the 12 gauge. I'm using 100 grains of black powder. Okay, I'll say it again in the video, but remember, this is for 12 gauge. Okay, now this same method could be used for other shotgun rounds. It could be used for 410. It could be used for 20 gauge. It could be used for 28 gauge, 16 gauge. Any shotgun shell that will accept a 209 primer, you can use this method. However, your powder loads will vary. 12 gauge is a larger powder load because it's a larger shell than a 16 gauge. Okay, 16 gauge is going to use less powder than a 12 gauge. By that same method, a 10 gauge is bigger than 12 gauge, so 10 gauge would use more powder than a 12 gauge would. Okay, so just let yourself know that. A good rule of thumb for the powders, depending on what shotgun load you're going to want to use, is to just go ahead and look at the standard loadout per caliber. They may even have black powder shotgun loadout chart for you that may help you. But either way, do your research, do your homework, make sure that you know everything that you're doing before you're doing it. Otherwise, you can blow up the gun, you can blow yourself up, whatever, and I don't want to hear no crying. Alright, so here we go. Okay, so now that we've gone through the basics of the safety aspect of this, let's go ahead and show you how to do what we do. Okay, so here's the deal. You're going to need a spent shotgun shell. You're going to need a load. In this case, we'll use BBs. You could also use a whole bunch of other things. You're going to need some sort of a punch. In this case, I'm using a brass hammer that can be used to take down a katana. Obviously, you're going to need new primers. Okay, powder, a powder measure, a small candle for the wax, and obviously a lighter to light the candle. Alright, so let's get started. First thing that you're going to do is you're going to find the shell. Now down all the way at the bottom of that, you might be able to see it right there. There is a small hole. And that hole has that primer on it. Now, you're going to take your punch, and you're going to find that hole, you're going to wiggle it around, you're going to feel for that hole. Then you're going to find your hammer. In this case, I'll use my axe. And the idea then is you're going to hit that till the primer comes out. Bye-bye primer. Yay. Alright, so now you have a hole. Find a new primer. We're using 209 primers here. Okay? Virtually every shotgun shell uses a 209 primer. Why fight it? Okay? Your 209 primer looks like that. Okay? And you just put that primer in the hole. I start to see it with my thumb. Now, it's not completely seated, as you can see, perhaps there. There's a small lip. So in that case, I'm just going to go ahead, disassemble my power measure so that I have a, right? And I'm just going to put it down at the bottom of my shell, somewhere over the front of it. And seat that shell. Seat that primer into that shell. Yay. Alright, so now I'm just going to take my powder measure, put it back together. And while I'm messing with this, might as well set it to the right. Measure. Okay, so now we have a brand new primer in our shell. Well, now all we gotta do, and now that I've set it to 100 grain, all I gotta do is put my black powder into my powder measure. Yeah, we got a little bit of a mess. Oh well. Okay, it'll be a little bit more than 100 grain. It's not going to hurt. There you go. Alright. So now then, before we go any further, I'm just going to get as much of this black powder off of my table as I can. Alright. Now, we've got the primer, we got powder, now we need a wad. We're going to use paper towel for this. I'm going to cut me a string, a strip of it, and I'm just going to roll it over. Where it's like this. Now I'm going to use my punch. And sometimes you need to give it a little extra because you want the wad to completely cover the black powder. Alright. Now then, a good gauge to use for this is to put, I'm going to go ahead and trim the top of this off. I probably should have done this beforehand, but I didn't, and so whatever. Because we are using wax to seal the end of our shells. If I were going to crimp this, well, I would not be doing what I'm doing, because you have to have plastic to crimp. But I don't have a need for it in this method, so I'm not gonna. Alright, so now we've got that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and make sure that wad's down there good and tight. Okay, now there's two ways of doing this. I can either dump BBs into my powder measure and get BBs everywhere, or I can kind of eyeball it and have about that much. A little more. Okay. Push them down a little bit. Alright. So now then, guess what? Get yourself another wad. Roll it up again. Smash it in there real good. So it looks like that. Now, get your candle. In this case, I'm going to use the end of a matchstick to light my candle. Now I'm going to let my candle build up some wax. And I'm going to hold it to the sides just to kind of speed up the melting a little bit. I don't necessarily want to take forever with this video. And then you start dumping wax to the end of your shell. Boom, done. Now all you gotta do is wait for the wax to solidify, harden, and dry. And that's that. I've already done 2 tonight, and they all took about that same amount of time. Didn't take very long. And inside of 10 or 15 minutes, you probably could have, gee, I don't know, more than you'd need, that's for sure. So, just something to think about. It's a good way to keep it's a good way to ensure that you always have loads for your shotgun, because these aren't very heavy. All you need is primer and powder and you're in business. So there you go. Have a good one. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your time. Defend your homes wisely.